Israel, Hamas and the US are close to a ceasefire. The local housing market is ending the year with a whimper, and Andrew and Nicola Forrests buy Akubra. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Monday, the 20th of November, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you have an interview, a very investing-themed interview today. Stephen Tang, Head of Portfolio Solutions at Zenith Investments.
Yeah, so we talk about what type of companies you should be investing in the current environment. And we're talking about large caps here. Stephen likes quality companies. That's the bottom line, particularly given the uncertainty that's around the place. He said, look for those companies, good cash flow, profits, those sorts of things. So if you're interested in investing, listen to the interview.
Yeah, well worth a listen. It's coming up a bit later on. The main story this morning, Sean, Israel, Hamas and the United States are close to an agreement to free dozens of women and children held hostage in Gaza in exchange for a 5-day pause in fighting.
Media outlets are reporting the good news, saying the release could begin in days, barring last-minute hitches. It would be the first sustained pause in fighting in the conflict since Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7. Under the terms of an agreement, all parties to the conflict would freeze combat operations for at least 5 days, while an initial 50 or more of what are believed to be a total of 239 hostages are released in batches every 24 hours. Overhead surveillance would monitor movement on the ground to police the pause. Now, the pause will also allow an increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance, including fuel, to enter the enclave. Officially, Israel and US authorities are saying no deal has yet been done. So this isn't a done deal, so to speak, Michael. All three sides, though, do agree they're working towards getting some sort of ceasefire in place.
Is it a surprise, Sean, that Israel would accept a ceasefire?
Somewhat, but concern about the captives and the rising civilian casualties in Gaza has increased pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu's government. More than 100 countries, and not the United States, interestingly, have called for a full and immediate ceasefire. Netanyahu is battling for political survival himself, and he wants to bring hostages home, but he doesn't really want to barter with Hamas. Over the weekend, thousands of hostage families and supporters ended a 5-day march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. US President Joe Biden, a key player in all this, he's against a ceasefire, or certainly against a permanent ceasefire, though he also knows he needs to free the 9 American hostages. Meanwhile, back home, protest marches continue across the country. An estimated 30,000 people attended a pro-Palestine rally in Sydney yesterday. That was the biggest. There were thousands demonstrating in Melbourne. There were also rallies in Brisbane and Adelaide.
All right, turning to markets, how did things finish up on Friday?
The S&P ASX 200 was flat. Well, more accurately, was down just a touch. It finished at 7,049 points. For the full week, the bourse was 1% higher. The energy stocks tumbled on Friday. That Woodside, Santos, Origin, they're all off between 1% and 2%. That's because the price of Brent fell on concerns about US and Chinese demand. The other end of the spectrum are the gold miners. Price of the precious metal is rising. That's helping companies like Evolution, Northern Star and Gold Road Resources.
And what's happening in international markets?
Wall Street closed up a touch on the weekend. For the week, the broad-based S&P 500 jumped 2.6%. That's 3 weeks in a row of a rising S&P 500. Mostly it's about growing confidence that the US Fed won't lift interest rates anymore and might even be forced to cut rates. Oil prices recovered a bit over the weekend, though Brent's still trading around $80 a barrel. Gold is creeping ever so slowly towards $2,000 an ounce, and the Aussie dollar starts the week above 65 US cents.
Sean, there's a bit to get through. Before we go to the break, though, the weekend edition, I just briefly need to mention this. The Fear and Greed weekend edition, which is released every kind of Saturday morning, is very different to our weekday shows, isn't it? It's very competitive.
We use words like objectophilia in it.
Yes, it is well worth a listen. The reason I'm mentioning it is because it is a competition between you and me to who can it's really a debate, isn't it?
Well, debate's probably being nice. Yeah, we can call it a debate. There's not that many rules. Debates tend to be a little more civil, shall we say?
We have an adjudicator.
We do.
Our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, who sits in judgment on us. But the thing is that I put the weekend's episode to a jury of impartial jurors.
Yes.
And It was my wife and kids who were
Totally impartial.
in the car while
Yeah.
I said, "Hey guys, listen to this, and I want you to tell me if you think I was robbed." And they thought I was robbed.
Well. What a surprise, because they're very, very intelligent people. Sean and the two kids, Maeve and Henry, very intelligent. They still think you were robbed.
Yeah, and so look, I just wanted to voice my protest now. I wanted to get it out there, and also just to say, hey, if you haven't listened to the weekend edition, go back and have a little bit of a listen. See if you think that the judging was as awful as I feel it was. And when I look back on it, it feels like it was very terrible. And the decision, I feel like I was robbed. Give it a go. Let us know what you think, and maybe next Saturday you can tune in and hear a better result.
You're not exactly a sort of comfortable loser.
No, I'm not. That's
Bit
probably a good way to put
harsh.
it. Yeah, it's a harsh way to finish up. We'll take a little break. We'll come back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, it was the second busiest auction weekend of the year, and the results weren't great, really. Preliminary clearance rates fell in Sydney and Melbourne.
More than 3,000 homes were scheduled to go under the hammer, and according to CoreLogic, the preliminary clearance rate was 68% across the country, down 1 percentage point. In Sydney, it was 69% from 1,100 auctions, and in Melbourne, it was 68% from 1,400 auctions. Adelaide again topped the charts, been doing that all year at 81%. Brisbane came in at 58%. Canberra had a preliminary clearance rate of 64%. The latest interest rate rise, plus the cumulative effect of the many previous hikes since last May, just is starting to combat that surprising strength in the market. There's only 4 more selling weekends ahead of Christmas, and the housing market, after a much, much better year than expected, kind of looks like it's going to finish with a whimper.
Now, Sean, this next story is one that just keeps on going, doesn't it? Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neil has confirmed more detainees than the initial 93 people could be released from immigration detention following a landmark High Court decision.
O'Neil confirmed the decision to free the 93 people could extend to up to 340 people, a figure flagged by Solicitor General Stephen Donoghue during the case. But O'Neil said it was very unlikely the court's decision would mean all of those people would be released from immigration detention. Speaking to Sky News, the minister conceded the government had been incorrectly advised by her department, Home Affairs, that the Commonwealth was likely to win the case. Now, that case, of course, had been brought by a stateless Rohingya man who lost his Australian visa and was detained after being convicted of raping a 10-year-old boy. The High Court's decision pretty much scuttled the idea of very long-term detention. All these people have been released, and clearly the opposition is making hay out of this one too.
Sean, I mentioned this one at the top of the show. Andrew and Nicola Forrest have bought Akubra, the 147-year-old hat company, for an undisclosed amount.
Yeah, so the deal was announced in Kempsey, New South Wales yesterday. For those of you who have never been to Kempsey, you should visit. Not exactly a thriving metropolis, but it is the home of Akubra. It marks the third fashion investment the Forrests have made through their private investment arm Tattarang. Now, those three have occurred since 2020. They acquired R.M. Williams back then. That deal was worth $190 million. Earlier this year, Tattarang took a 25% stake in Camilla. Andrew Forrest yesterday said there's nothing more proudly Australian than an Akubra. He thanked the Keir family, who he bought the brand off. Now, the Keir family have owned Akubra since 1918, when the founder, Benjamin Dunkley, transferred ownership to his son-in-law. Now, his son-in-law was a guy called Stephen Keir. Stephen Keir is also the name of the outgoing chair. He's the great-great-great-grandson of the original Stephen Keir.
Accent Group, owner of brands including Hype and Platypus shoe chains. Sean, it's very fashion-themed today, isn't it?
Well, we've got a sort of, Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales coming up, so we do actually have quite a few retail stories today.
Yeah, well, these brands, Hype, Platypus, that are owned by Accent, they're struggling with sales, apparently in the first 19 weeks of the financial year, lower than 12 months earlier.
Same-store sales, and it also includes, we should throw in the Athlete's Foot franchise, for example. Glue is another one. Same-store sales have fallen 2% so far this year. That sent the stock down 8% on Friday. With wholesale sales under pressure, group sales were slightly disappointing. Accent, which also has the Skechers and Style Runner brands, operates 800 stores and expects to open 70 new stores in the half, with many in November and December. I was very surprised at Accent. So we've got Skechers, Style Runner, Hype, Platypus, Athlete's Foot, Glue, 800 stores. That's a lot of stores.
So that was the AGM on Friday. Another company holding its AGM on Friday, Sean, was property developer giant Lend-Lease. Shareholders not too happy about the remuneration report.
No, they weren't. About 2/5 of investors, 40%, I think it was 39.8%, voted against the report, triggering a first strike against the board. There was also sizable votes against the re-election of 2 directors. Now, the company itself acknowledged that not everyone is happy with Chief Executive Tony Lombardo's turnaround strategy and not happy with the share price performance of the company. It's done okay in the past 3 weeks or so, up 12%, including a 2% jump on Friday. It's still off nearly 25% from its peak earlier in the year.
Sean, discount Chinese marketplace Temu. I hope I'm saying that correctly because I haven't actually used this before. I'm not a frequent Temu shopper. It has shot to the number 3 spot in the Australian e-commerce rankings, unseating better-known homegrown competition Kogan, Catch and MyDeal just 6 months after making its debut in this country.
Temu's tagline is "Shop like a billionaire," and it includes big discounts on items from replacement toothbrush heads to kitchenware and sneakers. It is now operating in 47 countries and has 120 million monthly users globally. In Australia, Temu has had an average of 7.68 million monthly visits. That's better than Wesfarmers and Woolworths-owned marketplaces. That's according to the Financial Review. The category, of course, is dominated by leader Amazon at 50 million average monthly visits. Temu debuted with significant growth in Australia as it spent up on acquiring customers. Been a little bit tougher more recent times. In October, the platform had a notable decline in both visits and unique users.
Shop like a billionaire is an interesting tagline, isn't it? I would have thought that if you're a billionaire and you were shopping, you wouldn't care about discounts and you wouldn't be going onto a discount website. You'd just be kind of paying full price, right?
Oh, you don't understand marketing.
So I'm sorry, Sean.
That's incredibly logical what you just said.
I know.
Let's ignore it.
Look, hey, maybe we could consult to Temu. Hey.
Maybe.
Well, clearly they don't actually need it, though, do they? They seem to be going quite well. Now, Sean, big day on Friday. Obviously, Optus Chief Executive Kelly Bayer Rosmarin fronted a Senate inquiry. She faced 2 hours of questioning by senators over the previous week's 14-hour Optus outage.
She acknowledged that the telco's performance was not acceptable. 228,000 emergency calls were unable to go through on the day of the outage, which the telco initially feared was the result of a cyber attack. Instead, it was a software upgrade by a company run by Optus's own parent, Singtel. Among the other details to emerge on Friday was an insight into the crisis communications on the day, who Optus spoke to and when, including the Communications Minister, the Office of the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the offices of all the state premiers and relevant departments. Everyone, it seems, but the public. On the day, the decision was made not to hold a press conference because, as Bayer Rosmarin told the hearing, it would have been unusual for a chief executive and people would have expected her to focus on fixing the problem. Really? The pressure is on Bayer Rosmarin to resign, something she mostly avoided commenting on last Friday. It's a subsidiary company, so maybe she does keep her job, but if this is a listed company, there is no way in the world she would still be CEO.
Yeah, that exchange was a little bit awkward. And
yeah.
I think she was asked 3 times. They kept repeating the question and she did just keep on dodging. You're like, oh, okay, it doesn't sound good.
No, definitely not.
No, we'll wait and see. International news time now. Sean, the boss of OpenAI, Sam Altman, was ousted over the weekend, surprising some very large investors and Microsoft, and already efforts are being made to bring him back.
This is a crazy story. As is appropriate for a tech story, it's fast moving. So OpenAI is the artificial intelligence company behind ChatGPT. OpenAI's board effectively sacked Altman, citing his alleged lack of candour in communications, and demoted its president and co-founder, Greg Brockman, leading him to quit. Now, apparently Microsoft, which invested about $13 billion into OpenAI and is its primary financial backer, didn't know, nor did Thrive Capital, the second largest shareholder in the company. I don't quite know what to say about this one. Now, Altman is being pushed to come back. Microsoft is a big part of that. He said he's considering returning, but he wants a new board and governance structure. Fair enough. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here.
You would have to think that what Microsoft wants, Microsoft is going to get in this particular case, right?
Yeah, so there's there's speculation, and I, sort of emphasize this as speculation, that the board was worried that Sam Altman wasn't staying true to OpenAI's theory of artificial intelligence and, the need to make sure it's very safe, a very safe environment. So there's probably more to it. I mean, for the board to come and kick him out is quite remarkable, but I dare say there must be more to it.
Oh, gosh, it's a fascinating story then, isn't it? I can't wait to see what else comes out of this one.
Yeah, I'm with you.
A space story, Sean. Thank you for including this one, but it's hard not to include it considering what's happened. SpaceX's colossal Starship spacecraft exploded during its second major test flight over the weekend, but apparently that constitutes a successful test.
Absolutely. As the Starship spacecraft was heading to near orbit, it appeared to burst apart. The theory is that the vehicle's flight termination system activated, clearly, while the vehicle was attempting to reach near orbit. The flight termination system is used to destroy a rocket if it starts to malfunction or deviates from its path during a launch. The success part comes from what SpaceX learned, apparently. On X, SpaceX said that, and I quote, "Today's test will help us improve Starship's reliability as SpaceX seeks to make life multi-planetary." I suppose it will. I mean, they would have learned something from it. I mean, and that test, of course, was better than the first test. That's when the rocket failed to properly separate from it, the big super heavy booster that it's used to launch. And that one failed. So, I mean, I think this was like 9 or 10 minutes. Far more successful, I believe.
It feels a little bit like they're looking for a silver lining in this. And it's a pretty grim silver lining that they found that, yes, we won't do this again, basically.
These are the most powerful rockets ever made, right? Each one of them must cost a bomb, so to speak.
Oh, yes. I suppose, quite literally, yes. And that's the thing, that every time they do it, there are so many things that could potentially go wrong. So for them to actually know that this system that is designed to actually terminate the flight if things start to go wrong, I mean, there's only one real way to test that, isn't it?
Yeah, try it.
So, hey, you know what?
Off we go.
Maybe that was right. Maybe it was a success.
Maybe.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed business interview. You're talking today, Sean, with Stephen Tang, Head of Portfolio Solutions at Zenith Investment.
Yes, all about investing in large caps and what he likes. He really likes quality companies at the moment, given the geopolitical circumstances, the economic circumstances, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And of course, Fear and Greed the week ahead with our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas, also there if you'd like to hear what's happening this week.
Yeah, well, worth a listen. I mean, we talk a lot about what happened last week with the US and UK inflation figures and the local labour market figures and just how that will impact on interest rates going forward. So great chat with Stephen.
Yeah, it certainly is. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Monday, the 20th of November, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook and X. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.